Jean and I were gone the last couple weeks. We just returned from a very refreshing 10 days in Alaska, one of the last 2 states that I had not been to. It was enjoyable because we traveled, as we like to do. We didn't get on a cruise boat. We didn't do any of those things. We flew into Anchorage and we rented a vehicle. That's not the vehicle we rented. But it is one we saw because we like to just kind of drive the back roads of America and see America, not what commercialism wants us to see, but to see many things. And we saw some interesting stuff, and I wanted to share a few of those pieces with us because one of them in particular related to the text this morning. This is an Alaskan RV, right? Complete with the boat on top and all the appropriate decorations, the footprints on the side. I'm sure many of you would like the phone number so you can call that person and purchase it. Then again, the signs we saw. We literally did a U-turn in the road for this sign. I want you to take a look at it carefully and see if you have ever seen a marquee with these things for sale on it. Only in Alaska, in the middle of nowhere, would you see someone selling panties, right? Odd. And then, again, we found this place, Walmike's. Now, Walmike's is, just one of those interesting places where you can buy anything from caribou antlers to Sarah Palin cutouts, of course. And the owner told us that, anybody here watch American Pickers? I love that show. That they were there 2 weeks prior to us checking things out. You know, this is just an ever-eternal, ongoing garage sale, as far as I can tell. Just a fascinating thing to see. Because let me show you one of the other things. I know that one of you will buy this. This is something that you'd want to hang definitely in your den, right next to the picture of your husband. But anyway, Walmike's reminds us of something very interesting. It reminded me of the saying that the adage that we have all used at times: one man's junk or trash is another man's treasure. Keep that in mind. One man's junk is another man's treasure, or one person's trash is another person's treasure. Because I think that's what our psalm is about. That is, and I want you to think with me here, that is that our treasure, what we treasure in life, what we value in life, really has very little to do with the item or the person itself. Value in life is not determined by, in most cases, by the item or the individual itself. It is determined by something outside of it, something beyond it, someone other than it who claims it, names it, and wants it. That's where value comes from. Not from me, but from that which claims me. Okay? Let me give you an example. Gold and silver are just minerals. They are just rocks like any other rocks, except that we have determined they're precious. So we have given them a value above other things. We have said they are important and we should get them and collect them and use them, not because they are, but because we say they are. Beaches. How many people want to live near beaches? But really, what are beaches but sand? And what fool would build a house on sand, right? Hilton is the fool who would build a house on sand. And when Hilton says the sand is valuable, it becomes valuable. So do you follow what I'm saying? Things are not valuable intrinsically because of who they are, but because of who or what names and claims them. And closer to home, it's the same way with us. We allow or often have our own value determined or dependent upon the institutions we associate with, or the organizations we give time to or work for, or the individuals outside of who we say are important enough to judge us or to measure us. And sometimes what we discover in doing that is how little value we really are to them. Do we not? I mean, sometimes they disappoint us. Sometimes they betray us, which makes us feel less important or devalued. Which shouldn't surprise us. I mean, none of this should really surprise us. Because the things to which we attach our self-esteem, anything outside of us, is fickle. It changes. It alters. It fluctuates. The world around us is never the same. And the roadside of life is strewn with individuals and organizations and institutions. There is a wreckage of people out there who have surrendered their value and their worth to others and or to society. All you have to do is watch what happens oftentimes to athletes or actors and actresses when they've moved beyond their prime. And what happens to their lives and so forth. Many of them taking their own lives as they deal with what it is to not have the worth they once had. Could Joan Rivers have any more facelifts? Seriously, as they seek to stay in a certain way in front of people. Do you see what I'm saying? Where is your self-worth? Your self-worth is often given to those people and things outside of us over which we have no control. And then we wonder why we are the way we are. But the psalmist says here that that's not how it should work. That's not the way it should be. That kind of valuation of our personhood, of our spirits, of our souls, neither fills nor will it last. Rather, we are told that the true and the lasting value is a spiritual self-esteem that can only be found in God. Now, notice how I said that, because we often say in God, but we really don't think about what that means. There are other words we could use. We look at God, we talk about God, all those things that make God objective, but when we say we are in God, there is a connection. When you stand in something, when you're in love, there's a whole different feel to it. As you connect with someone, you connect with something out, and you feel like you are a part of them and they are a part of you. Which is to say, or what I'm trying to say is that from our birth, from our creation, I believe there is a spot in our souls, in our lives, in our spirit, however you want to define it, that cannot be filled in a positive or successful way by anything but God. If you define God as the creator, as the source of all being, then the only way we can fill that spot is a connection with the divine. And as God is in us, so we become in God. Like being in love, in God. Connected, strengthened, and affirmed. The thing is, though, if God doesn't fill this spot, then anything and everything else will. You know, I'm not very good at science, but it seems to me that there is a scientific theorem or theory that anything, anywhere we leave a void, nature will naturally try to pump something in and fill it. That somehow this is what happens. And I think in many cases, this is what has happened to us in our modern society. As we have moved farther and farther away from that connection with God and that defining of God as the source of where we come from and to whom we go, we have begun to fill it with anything and everything else we can. It is the danger of our age. Because as we fill it with those other things, we begin to elevate or think we elevate our own importance. Because then I am important because of where I work. I am important because of how I dress. I am important because I am live. And the flip side of saying I am important because means that you are less so. That's the flip side. As we begin this process that falsely values us, because if you pull any one of those away, we've lost it. But in the time being, it makes us feel at an elevated level than others, which is different than we should. And it is that kind of thinking that creates the Bernie Madoffs that can take anything they want from anyone, known or unknown, for themselves, no matter what. And it is that kind of thinking that allows a James Holmes of Aurora to indiscriminately shoot people. Because there is no value to the other's life. Do you follow me? when we somehow evaluate ourselves by that standard, we can devalue others. And when we devalue others, we devalue life. Therefore, we can take it in any way, shape, or form we desire. Because others are just widgets in our day-to-day. But you see, if we are in God, if you are in God, then your whole perspective changes. Your whole understanding of high and low and even and equal respect is altered. People who we might otherwise think as low or lesser than us are no longer seen as obstacles in our way and problems to deal with. They are seen as potential helpers and beneficiaries to society if we could just figure out how to do it, if that became our focus. I mean, ultimately, you can pass all the legislation you want regarding banks, financial institutions, investment managers, but if their source of importance and value is in the wrong place, they will also always seek to be self-serving, no matter what we say they should do. And it's the same way. It's the same way. And you know, I have mixed emotions about gun control, but the reality is you can legislate for gun control all you want. If somebody wants to do harm, they will find a way to do it. Which doesn't mean that we should sell cannons to everybody, right? But it does mean that ultimately we cannot deal with these things unless, as the psalmist says, there is a change of heart. And that is determined by those values and those valuations of ourselves and those around us when we live in God. I think one of the great theological blunders of the church, and those, again, who may have a Catholic background versus a Protestant background, would understand this in regards to verse 5. Because, as I said, Augustine is the one who picked this up and turned a passage into a doctrine, which the church turned from a doctrine into a continual practice. It's one of the reasons that priests are supposed to be celibate, is that somehow there is sinful, that our sexual nature is sinful. Therefore, original sin, the fall, comes from the fact that we were created or conceived in sin. And it's caused for centuries all kinds of dilemmas and discomfort and struggles within Christian circles, which I'm not going to go into. But what I think is a more appropriate interpretation and application of this is that in our creation, in our origination, we were created not perfect, but good. We were created not complete, but incomplete. We were created with a spot in us that we can choose to fill. We can choose to fill whatever we want, whatever we determine is important. But there is only one thing that makes us complete. And God says, when you fill that hole in your soul, fill it with me. Because when you do with that, everything else falls into place, and everything else falls into a proper perspective. And to tell you a story, this is a deviation. I'll tell you a story. A number of years back, had a young man, he was probably 35, came into my office to talk to me. It was a moral, ethical issue for him. He came in to talk to me because his family was the last family that owned Dittos. Now, you guys are way too young to know what a Ditto is. Anybody else over here that was a teacher knows what a Ditto machine is? Do you remember Gestetners? Remember those inky things? You used to type them out, and then you put them in a machine, and you could run replicas of them? They smelled great. They got ink all over your hands. Yeah, we used to do worship bulletins, and I remember all of that. What a pain. But that's what we did it before photocopiers, and that's what we did it before computers and so forth. There were Dittos. Young man came into my office. His family was the last family that owned Dittos, and they had seen this coming, and they bought up every Ditto in the United States to sell to public schools. And he knew that when the last Ditto was sold, it was all done. It was done. And he knew that he would have enough wealth to never work again. Neither he, nor his children, nor his children's children, nor Well, how's that commandment go, right? Just on down the line. So what was the dilemma? The dilemma was, what about the people who'd worked for his family business all those years and helped him to accumulate that wealth? What about them who would no longer have a job? What do I do for them? And should I? And his faith said, I wouldn't have what I have if they hadn't given me what they'd given me. And so they were equal partners when that all dissolved. You see, when you're in God, you think of things and you act differently than when you're not. Back to my sermon. There's a translation in the Bible. You know, words change. Words evolve. They have different meanings. And there's one word I think that's insignificant and applicable today that has changed. And that's the word believe. Around 300 AD, the word belief shifted. It changed. When the church roads became institutional, all of a sudden you began to believe in creeds. You began to believe in the church, which is not how the word was used early in the church. Rather, the word belief in its original Latin forms meant to trust to give yourself fully. It was not a subjective thing or objective thing. It was a subjective thing. It's like being in love. You believed in someone. You gave yourself completely. You trusted them with all your being. Which is significant because when you go to the passage in John where it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall have life, we treat that as, well, I believe Jesus is the Son of God, I believe this. We come up with all these kinds of things when really that whole thing would change to the fact, whoever trusteth fully in him. Do you see the difference? It's like being in water and looking at water. Whoever trusteth in him shall have life. Completely different meaning. It's exactly what the psalmist says. When you are in God, when you trust fully, your self-worth and everybody else's changes. This past week, I did what I always do. When Forbes publishes their best colleges in the United States magazine, I always look to see where any university I've been associated with ranks. Is there any other fool that does that here? You see my vanity that shows right here, huh? I try to see where, they rank according to all kinds of criteria they come up with, the cost and jobs that graduates get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I started to look at it, and I went through all of them, then I went through my kids, and I went through everybody I knew. I had to see that. I wanted to see if Florida really ranked above right, just giving you a hard time. Anyway, Florida got a good ranking, by the way, I will say that. Anyway, I realized that what I was doing was all wrong. Totally wrong. Because what I got from those institutions of education had absolutely nothing to do with the value that Forbes magazine put on it. Absolutely nothing. It had to do with the experience I had, the learning that people gave me, and who I became because of it. That's the real value of those things in life that are important. Not because somebody says it is, not because it's in some ranking, but because of who and what it makes of you. So it is with each of us. Because if you're doing the right things, if you've got them in the right order, then what I say to you is you'll be very comfortable wherever you go, whatever you do, because nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can say that you are worth less than somebody else because you aren't. Nobody can take that away from you. But if you are constantly seeking to fill that void with other things, then you are at the whim of everything and everyone around you. For the world is constantly trying to tell you and sell you what is important. Just drive down the street, look at the marquees, and you'll know what society values. Right? So we buy those things, most of which we eventually just throw away. But Wall Mike's in Alaska, Wall Mike's reminded me that the value of us and of many things is in the eyes of the beholder, to which God says, you are valuable to me. The challenge is to find ways to accept that and to share that, to make you and me and the world a better place. Amen.